Hey everyone, hope you're doing great. Welcome back to my channel. In today's video, we'll dive into what if Deku bonded with the Venom symbiote. Smash that subscribe button, and be sure to peek at the description below. Let's begin. The wind on the rooftop was a liar. It whispered of freedom, of flight, of endless blue potential, a stark and cruel contrast to the words that had just finished bulldozing the foundations of Izuku Midoriya's world. The concrete beneath his worn-out red sneakers felt like the edge of a cliff, and the distant, vibrant hum of Nuzurifu was a song from a life he could no longer participate in. In front of him, the skeletal figure of Toshinori Yagi coughed, a wet, rattling sound that seemed to steal the very air from Izuku's lungs. The steam that hissed from his emaciated form was the ghost of the glorious hero who had stood there only moments before. All Might. The symbol of peace. The man who had just taken Izuku's 15-year-old dream, held it in his callous, tired hands and crushed it into dust. So no. I honestly don't think you can be a hero without a quirk. The words didn't echo. They didn't need to. They had embedded themselves directly into his soul, shards of ice in his heart. He'd asked the question, the one that had haunted his every waking moment, the one he'd scribbled in the margins of his notebooks, and whispered to his All Might posters in the dark. He'd finally found the courage to ask it to the man himself, and the answer was a definitive, soul-shattering period at the end of a lifelong sentence. It's not bad to dream, young man. Toshinori continued, his voice softer now, tinged with a pity that felt worse than any scorn. But you have to be realistic. He gestured vaguely with a bony hand towards the city below. Pro heroes are always laying their lives on the line. We fight villains who don't hesitate, who play for keeps. I can't simply say, you can be a hero even without power. He winced as another cough racked his frame, a speck of blood appearing at the corner of his lips. He wiped it away with the back of his hand, his movements weary. Look at me. Even with this quirk, even as the symbol of peace, this is what a moment of carelessness brought me. He lifted his shirt, revealing the horrific, swirling scar that dominated his torso. It was a crater of ruined flesh, a vortex of pain permanently etched into his skin. It was more gruesome than Izuku could have ever imagined. It was the physical manifestation of the very danger All Might was describing. Some villains just can't be beaten with fists alone. The risk is too great. So no. I'm sorry, kid. But it's a noble thought. He sighed, the sound thin and reedy. If you want to help people, you can always become a police officer. They get a bad rap because they're often left to clean up the mess, but it's a fine and respectable profession, a police officer. The words were meant to be a comfort, a consolation prize, but to Izuku they were an insult. It was like telling a bird born without wings that it could still be a fine worm digger. He wasn't just a fan of heroes, he wanted to be one. To save people with a smile. To be the pillar of hope that All Might had been for him. He couldn't speak. His throat was a knot of unshed tears and silent screams. He could only nod, a jerky, puppet-like motion. His gaze fell to the ground, to his yellow backpack, where the scorched pages of his hero analysis for the future, number 13, were tucked away. All Might had signed it. The autograph felt like an epitaph now. Toshinori seemed to take his silence as acceptance. Good. Stay safe, young man. He turned and walked towards the rooftop access door, his lanky form a fragile silhouette against the setting sun. The door clicked shut behind him, the sound as final as a gavel. And then, Izuku was alone. The world went silent. The city noise faded into a dull roar. The wind stopped whispering lies and started to feel cold, biting at his exposed skin. He stood there for a long time, unmoving, as the sky bled from orange and purple into a deep, bruised indigo. He felt hollow. Not just sad or disappointed. He was a vessel that had been emptied of its entire contents, leaving only a brittle, echoing shell. Everything that had defined him, his dream, his drive, his relentless optimism, had been scooped out and discarded by the one person he thought would understand. Slowly, mechanically, he shuffled to the railing, his red shoes scuffing against the grit. He looked down at the streets below, at the tiny cars and tinier people moving with a purpose he no longer possessed. For a terrifying, fleeting moment, he understood the temptation of the empty air in front of him. A single step was all it would take to end the hollowness. But that wasn't him. Even in his despair, a deep-seated instinct for self-preservation, or perhaps just sheer cowardice, kept his feet planted firmly on the concrete. He wasn't a hero. He wasn't even brave. He was just a quirkless, useless Deku who had just had his one foolish hope extinguished. He turned away from the edge. The walk down the sterile, echoing stairwell was an eternity. Each step was a lead weight. His backpack, usually a comforting presence, felt like it was trying to pull him down, to pin him to the floor. When he emerged onto the street, the world felt alien. The bright lights of storefronts seemed too loud. The cheerful chatter of people heading home from work was a language he no longer spoke. He saw a billboard for the hero empty lady and felt nothing. No excitement, no urge to analyze her quirk, no spark of inspiration. Just a flat, gray emptiness. He didn't want to go home. He couldn't face his mother. He couldn't bear to see the hopeful, worried look in her eyes and have to tell her that her son was, and always would be, a failure. He needed to walk. To just put one foot in front of the other until the numbness wore off, or his legs gave out. His feet, operating on some forgotten muscle memory, took him down a familiar, yet long-avoided path. A shortcut. One that led through Dagoba Municipal Beach. It was a fitting destination. The beach was a monument to neglect, a graveyard of forgotten things. For years, ocean currents had turned this once beautiful stretch of coastline into a dumping ground for the city's unwanted trash. Illegal dumping had made it worse, creating mountains of rusted appliances, broken furniture, and tangled nests of metal and plastic that rose like skeletal sea monsters from the sand. The air was thick with the smell of brine, rust, and decay. It was a place where things went to die. Just like his dream. He trudged onto the sand, his shoes sinking into the soft, grimy surface. The sun had fully set now, leaving the world in the dim twilight of the city's glow reflecting off the low-hanging clouds. The waves lapped listlessly at the shore, their sound a weary sigh. Izuku walked past a tower of discarded computer monitors, their screens dark and blank like 1,000 dead eyes. He navigated around a skeletal car chassis, its metal groaning in the sea breeze. This was his soul, manifested as a landscape. A vast, polluted junkyard of broken parts and shattered potential. He stopped, his gaze fixed on the dark, churning water. Maybe he would just sit here until morning. Maybe the salt and the rot would seep into him, and he'd become just another piece of forgotten debris. The thought held a strange, morbid comfort. He was so lost in his own bleak thoughts that he almost missed it. A light. It wasn't a plane or a helicopter. It was a single, sharp streak of burning silver, tearing through the cloud cover from high above. It moved too fast, descending at an impossible angle. It wasn't silent either. A high-pitched, ethereal shriek accompanied its descent, a sound that felt like it was tearing at the edges of reality itself. It grew from a needle of light to a blazing fireball in seconds. Izuku's head snapped up, his empty eyes widening for the first time in hours. His analytical mind, buried but not yet dead, tried to process it. A meteor? Here? In the middle of the city? It slammed into the beach less than 200 meters away from him. The impact was not the thunderous explosion he might have expected. It was a deep, resonant thump, a sound that vibrated up through the soles of his shoes and into his bones. A plume of sand and junk sprayed into the air. For a moment, there was silence, broken only by the settling groan of disturbed scrap metal. His first instinct was fear. His second was to run. But a third, far stranger impulse took hold. It was a listless, morbid curiosity. The worst thing that could possibly happen to him had already happened today. His world was already over. What was a falling star in the face of such complete and utter ruin? What did it matter? Maybe it was a villain's attack. Maybe it was just a chunk of space rock. Maybe it would vaporize him and save him the trouble of waking up tomorrow. He started walking towards the impact site. He moved cautiously through the labyrinth of trash, his heart thumping a slow, heavy rhythm against his ribs. The air grew warmer, and a strange, almost electric smell, like ozone and burnt sugar, pricked at his nostrils. He crested a small dune made of compacted trash bags and looked down. There, in the center of a shallow crater about 3 meters wide, was the object. It wasn't a rock. It was a small, ovoid meteorite, no bigger than a football, cracked open like a geode. The outer shell was charred and pitted, but the inside was where the wrongness began. Coiled within the fractured rock was something dark and viscous, a pool of living shadow that seemed to drink the ambient light from the city. It was black, but it was a blackness so deep it seemed to have its own texture. It pulsed with a slow, rhythmic beat, like a heart. Droplets of the substance would occasionally rise from the central mass, hovering for a moment like anti-gravity oil before being reabsorbed. It shifted and swirled, iridescent patterns like an oil slick on deep water chasing each other across its surface. It was alive. Izuku froze, a primal fear finally piercing through his apathy. This was not a quirk. This was not natural. This was something utterly alien. He should have been running, screaming, calling the police, anything. But he was mesmerized. He watched as a tendril of the black substance stretched out, tentatively, and touched a piece of scrap metal. The metal instantly developed a spiderweb of black veins before crumbling into rust-colored dust. As he watched, a thought, not his own, brushed against the edge of his consciousness. It wasn't a voice, not yet. It was a feeling, a raw, unfiltered impression. Hunger. Cold. Alone. Izuku flinched, looking around wildly. Was someone there? But the beach was deserted. The feeling came again, stronger this time, a whisper in the back of his mind. It felt ancient and impossibly vast. So long in the dark, in the cold. Where? He took a half-step back, his shoe dislodging a loose piece of rebar. It clattered down the junk pile, the sound deafening in the sudden silence. The black mass reacted. The entire pool of liquid shadow snapped towards him, its surface coalescing into a single, focused point. It was like an eye-opening, an eye made of midnight and void. It didn't see him with light. He could feel it perceiving him in a way he couldn't comprehend. It felt his heat, the electricity in his nerves, the frantic beat of his heart. And then, it felt something more. It felt the chasm inside him. The vast, echoing emptiness where a dream used to be. It felt the despair, the hopelessness, the raw, screaming anguish of a spirit that had been utterly broken. To the creature, it was not a wound. It was an invitation. It was a perfect, empty vessel, a void waiting to be filled. It also sensed something else, something buried deep beneath the pain, a ferocious, stubborn willpower. A desperate desire to be more. The whisper in his mind solidified, coalescing into coherent, sibilant thought. It was a voice that was both a rumble and a hiss, a sound that seemed to come from everywhere at once. So much potential, so much drive, wasted. Such an empty vessel. We can fix that. The words were a promise. A temptation. A lifeline thrown into the abyss of his despair. We can fix that. It was everything he'd wanted to hear All Might say. Before Izuku could process the thought, before he could scream or run or even breathe, the substance lunged. It didn't fly through the air like a projectile. It flowed, an arrow of living darkness that covered the distance between the crater and him in a heartbeat. He had no time to react. It hit him square in the chest, and the world dissolved into a nightmare of sensation. It was cold. Impossibly, horribly cold, a blast of interstellar chill that sank through his uniform and into his bones. But it wasn't wet. It was a dry, crawling sensation as the black goo spread across his chest, his arms, his neck. It seeped into him, flowing through the weave of his clothes, into his pores, under his skin. It was a violation of the most fundamental kind. His body was no longer his own. He choked, trying to scream, but the substance flowed into his mouth, tasting of static and darkness. It filled his lungs, but instead of suffocating him, it felt like it was bonding with them, breathing for him. He clawed at his chest, his fingers sinking into the shifting, malleable biomass that was now fused to his skin. Then came the flood. He was drowning in a sea of alien thoughts and feelings. Millennia of drifting through the cold vacuum of space. A burning hatred for a certain sound, a clanging, bell-like frequency. A predatory, all-consuming hunger that was less a desire for food and more a fundamental law of its being. And memories, flashes of other hosts, other worlds, other battles, a chaotic storm of experiences that were not his. His mind reeled, threatening to shatter under the onslaught. He felt its consciousness intertwining with his own, its ancient, predatory instincts wrapping around his timid, human thoughts. He was Izuku Midoriya. He was something else. He was, the Union was agonizing. His nervous system flared as the alien biology forged connections, hijacking his synapses, rewriting his cellular structure. It was a symphony of agony that made him collapse to his knees, his body convulsing in the sand. And then, as suddenly as it began, it stopped. The blackness receded, sinking completely into his body, leaving no trace on his skin or clothes. The cold faded, replaced by a strange, humming warmth that settled deep in his core. He gasped, taking his first real breath, the air tasting sharper, cleaner than before. The world came rushing back, but it was different. Brighter. Louder. More detailed. He could hear individual conversations from the street, blocks away. He could smell the salt on the breeze, the exhaust from a passing bus, the faint scent of takoyaki from a street vendor a kilometer away. He could feel the vibrations of the ground, the subtle shift of the sand beneath him, the thrumming energy of the city as a whole. And the voice was no longer a whisper. It was a permanent resident, a rumbling, possessive presence nestled right behind his eyes. Better, it growled in his mind. A good fit. Strong spirit. We will be powerful together. Izuku scrambled backward, crab walking away from the empty crater, his mind a maelstrom of terror and confusion. What are you? He stammered aloud, his voice cracking. We are your salvation, the voice answered, a hint of dark amusement in its tone. You were empty. We are full. You were weak. We are strong. They told you that you could not be a hero. With us, you will be more. He pushed himself to his feet, his legs trembling. He looked at his hands. They were his hands, pale and callous from years of frantic note-taking. But they didn't feel entirely his. He felt a latent power coiled in his muscles, a sense of predatory readiness he had never known. He had to get out of there. He had to go home. He had to, what? What could he possibly do? Tell his mom an alien goo monster had moved into his body? They'd lock him in a psychiatric ward. He grabbed his backpack and started to run, a frantic, stumbling flight away from the beach, away from the crater. But he couldn't run from the voice. It was with him, in him. This body is frail, it commented, its tone analytical. But the will is strong. And the heart, so much potential for rage. Good. Rage is fuel. Shut up, Izuku whimpered, clutching his head. Get out of my head. We cannot, the voice said simply. We are one now. Bonded. You are us, and we are you. This is a partnership. A partnership? It felt like a hostile takeover. As he stumbled out of the alleyway that led away from the beach, a sound cut through his panic. A series of loud, rapid explosions. They were close. His head snapped in the direction of the noise, his old habits dying hard. A villain attack. His first thought, born of All Might's words and his own despair, was to run the other way. He wasn't a hero. He was nothing. But the voice in his head had a very different reaction. A fight, it hissed, a wave of eager, predatory excitement washing through Izuku's mind. It was a feeling so potent it made his teeth ache. Conflict. Good. We are hungry. Let's see the prey. No, Izuku muttered, trying to force his legs to turn, to go home. No, we're not. Then he heard the screams. And he saw the smoke. It was coming from the Takoba shopping district. The same place he'd seen the sludge villain earlier. His heart hammered against his ribs. The sludge villain. The one All Might had captured. Had it escaped? Before he could decide, his legs were moving. The old, foolish, heroic instinct surged, but this time it was supercharged by the alien's bloodlust. He ran, his movements faster, more fluid than ever before. He wasn't getting tired. The burning in his lungs was gone, replaced by the cool, humming energy of his new passenger. He arrived at the scene to a familiar, horrifying sight. A crowd was held back by the police. The pro-heroes, Kamui Woods, Death Arms, Backdraft, were all there, but they were ineffective, and in the center of the fiery chaos was the sludge villain, larger and more volatile than before. And it had a hostage, a boy with spiky ash blonde hair, wearing a black school uniform. His eyes, usually full of rage and arrogance, were wide with genuine terror. He was thrashing, setting off explosions that only served to spread the fires. Kaken. The world narrowed to that single point. His childhood friend, his lifelong tormentor, was going to die. And the heroes were just watching. They didn't have the right quirks. It was too dangerous. Izuku's blood ran cold. This was his fault. If he hadn't clung to All Might's leg, the villain would still be safely in a soda bottle. Despair and guilt warred with terror. He was frozen. A useless Deku, just like always. That one, the voice snarled, its focus sharpening with lethal intent. The explosive one. We remember his scent. Arrogant. Loud. But strong. A survivor. Then, a wave of contemptuous dismissal, and the slime. Pathetic. A parasite with no will of its own. It is weak. We are strong. Let's show them. I can't, Izuku whispered, his body trembling. All Might said, the symbol of failure? The voice spat, the words dripping with ancient scorn. The broken old man who left you to die on a roof? He is the past. We are the future. Move! The command wasn't a suggestion. A jolt of alien energy surged through him, and his legs moved on their own, catapulting him forward, under the police tape, and into the danger zone. Kid! Get back here! Death Arms yelled, but Izuku didn't hear him. He was running, his mind screaming in protest, but his body, urged on by the symbiotic predator, was a blur of motion. He saw Kaken's panicked eyes lock onto him. He saw the disbelief, the flicker of anger, and then the raw, undiluted plea for help. That was all it took. Izuku's will and the symbiote's power slammed into alignment for the first time. The goal was the same, save the hostage. Their methods, however, were about to diverge wildly from anything the world of heroes had ever seen. I couldn't just stand there and watch you die. Izuku screamed, the words ripping from his throat. As he closed the distance, the sludge villain turned its murky gaze on him. You again! The little brat who got in my way. It lashed out with a slimy tendril. Izuku didn't dodge. He didn't need to. Ours, the voice in his head declared, a statement of absolute ownership. A profound change rippled through him. Black, viscous biomass erupted from his back and arms, not forming a suit or a monster, but something far more primal and terrifying. It was a chaotic explosion of living darkness. Two thick, twitching tendrils, like cables woven from shadow, shot from his shoulder blades. His arms, from the elbow down, were coated in the same shifting, black material, ending not in hands, but in long, wickedly sharp talons. His eyes, once wide and green with fear, now blazed with an eerie, phosphorescent green-white light. He didn't slow down. He didn't throw his backpack. He didn't even try to dig. One of the black tendrils shot forward with the speed of a striking cobra. It didn't aim for the villain's eyes. It whipped around Bakugo's outstretched arm, the symbiotic material morphing to get a perfect, non-slip grip. And then, Izuku pulled. The force was astronomical. The sludge villain, for all its mass, had no anchor. The sound was like a giant suction cup being ripped off wet marble. With a grotesque slurp, Bakugo was torn free from the villain's suffocating grip, sent flying through the air to land in a heap a safe distance away. The sludge villain roared in fury, its amorphous body surging towards the now exposed Izuku. I'll kill you! Izuku didn't flinch. He stood his ground, a small boy wreathed in writhing black appendages. The second tendril on his back snapped forward, not to grab, but to strike. It impacted the villain's core with the force of a battering ram, splattering green slime across the pavement. Simultaneously, Izuku lunged, his own symbiote-coated arms slashing through the villain's body. The talons were sharper than any blade, severing the villain's cohesion, destabilizing its form. The entire confrontation lasted less than 5 seconds. The sludge villain, torn, battered, and destabilized, collapsed into a sprawling, inert puddle of green muck. Silence. A profound, stunned silence fell over the shopping district. The fires still crackled, but the screams had stopped. The crowd was speechless. The pro-heroes stood frozen, their mouths agape. Kamui Wood's branch-like arms hung limply. Death Arms stared, his powerful fists unclenched in sheer disbelief. Bakugo, gasping for air on the pavement, pushed himself up and stared at Izuku. His expression was a mixture of shock, confusion, and something Izuku had never seen directed at him before: fear, absolute, primal fear. He wasn't looking at Deku, the useless, quirkless pebble. He was looking at the monster that had just saved his life. Izuku stood panting in the center of the road, the black tendrils retracting, the dark biomass receding back into his skin as if it had never been there. The eerie light in his eyes faded, leaving them wide and panicked once more. The adrenaline, both human and alien, began to drain away, leaving him trembling and horrified at what he'd just done. Threat neutralized, the voice in his head rumbled, a deep satisfaction resonating through their bond. Pathetic creature. The explosive one is safe. Good. He may be useful later. Then a new urgent thought: they are watching. The costumed ones. They will ask questions. They will want to dissect us. We do not answer. We do not stay. Go. Now. The warning jolted Izuku back to reality. The heroes were starting to move, their faces grim. He couldn't be here. He couldn't explain. He turned and fled, disappearing into a side alley before anyone could react. From the edge of the crowd, hidden in the shadows of a building, Toshinori Yagi watched the boy run. He had seen everything. He had been about to step in, to force his broken body to act, when the Midoriya boy had burst from the crowd. He had witnessed the same heroic spirit he dismissed on the rooftop, but this time it was backed by a power that was utterly terrifying. It wasn't a quirk he recognized. It was violent, primal, and shockingly effective. It was dark, yet it had been used to save a life. He saw the boy's heroism, but he also saw the monstrousness of the power he wielded. And as he watched him flee, a cold, unsettling thought crept into his mind. What have I done? And more importantly, what has that boy become? Meanwhile, Izuku was huddled in a dark, grimy alleyway miles away, his back pressed against a cold brick wall, trying to catch his breath. The symbiote was quiet now, sated and content, a warm, purring presence in his chest. But the silence was somehow worse. It left Izuku alone with the memory of the snapping tendrils, the feeling of the villain's body tearing under his claws, the look of terror on Kaken's face. He had been a monster. He had saved someone, yes, but he had done it as a monster. He looked at his hands. They were just his hands again. But he knew what they had done. He knew what was sleeping just beneath the surface. A low chuckle echoed in the confines of his skull, a sound like gravel rolling in honey. That was a good start, the voice murmured, its hunger already beginning to stir again. The sludge, it smelled of desperation and filth. Delicious. But the explosive one, he smells of fear and ash and ambition. So much better. Izuku squeezed his eyes shut, a single, terrified tear finally tracing a path through the grime on his cheek. His dream of being a hero like All Might was dead, but as he sat there, a vessel for a terrifying, hungry power from the stars, a new and far more dangerous possibility began to take root in the ruins of his soul. The journey home was a new kind of torment. Every sense, hijacked and amplified by his silent passenger, screamed at Izuku. The mundane trip from the shopping district to his quiet apartment complex became a gauntlet of overwhelming stimuli. The rumble of a passing train wasn't just a sound. It was a physical vibration he felt in his teeth and bones. The neon signs of late-night ramen shops didn't just glow. They burned into his retinas with agonizing intensity, leaving phantom images dancing in his vision. He could smell everything. The stale cigarette smoke on a salaryman's coat from 10 paces away, the sweet perfume of a woman talking on her phone across the street, the coppery tang of a discarded can in a gutter. It was too much, a chaotic symphony of a world he'd never truly perceived before. And through it all, the voice, his new co-pilot, offered a running, predatory commentary. Look at them, it hissed in the echo chamber of his skull as he hurried past the group of laughing teenagers. So fragile. All soft tissue and brittle bones. We could snap them like twigs. Stop it, Izuku whispered, his voice trembling as he pulled his hood further over his head, trying to shrink into himself. He looked like any other paranoid kid, but his paranoia had a name, and it was currently cataloging the structural weaknesses of every person he passed. The metal boxes are loud, it noted as a car sped by. But weak. Thin shells. The creatures inside are softer still. Easy prey. They're people, not prey, Izuku shot back in a choked whisper, earning a strange look from an elderly woman walking her dog. He flinched and quickened his pace. The worst part was the hunger. It wasn't his own. It was a deep, knowing, primal need that radiated from the core of his being. It was the symbiote's hunger, intensified by the violent expenditure of energy during the fight. It made his stomach churn and his mouth water at the most inappropriate, horrifying moments. He looked at a pigeon pecking at a crumb and the voice purred, living protein. We could sample it. Izuku felt a wave of nausea and revulsion so strong he nearly doubled over. By the time he reached the familiar, unassuming door of his family's apartment, he was a wreck. His hands shook as he fumbled for his keys. The simple act of unlocking his own front door felt like disarming a bomb. The door clicked open, and he was hit with the warm, comforting smell of katsudan. His mother, Inko Midoriya, bustled out of the kitchen, her face a mixture of relief and worry. Izuku! Oh, thank goodness. I saw the news, the villain attacked near your school. I was so worried. She rushed forward to hug him, and he stiffened, a bolt of pure panic shooting through him. The female progenitor, the voice observed, its tone dangerously curious. She smells of concern, and salt. And she is soft. Very soft. So much flesh. Don't you dare, Izuku projected with all the mental force he could muster, a silent, desperate scream. He hugged his mother back with a rigid awkwardness, his mind a battlefield. Inko pulled back, her brow furrowed with concern. Izuku? Are you all right? You're pale. And you're trembling. I am fine, Mom, he stammered, forcing a weak smile. Just a long day. I'm really tired. Of course you are. Go wash up. I made your favorite, she said, her smile returning, though her eyes still held a shadow of worry. Izuku fled to the refuge of his room, shutting the door behind him and leaning against it, his heart hammering like a drum solo. He slid down to the floor, burying his face in his hands. The room was a shrine to All Might, a monument to a dead dream. Posters of the symbol of peace smiled down at him, their bright colors a mockery of the darkness that had taken up residence inside him. He was a walking contradiction. A boy who dreamed of saving people, now bonded to a creature that saw them as menu items. Okay, he said aloud, his voice raspy in the quiet room. Okay. We need to talk. He felt foolish, talking to himself, but the immediate response in his head confirmed he wasn't alone. We have been talking, the voice rumbled, a hint of dark amusement coloring its tone. You have mostly been whimpering. What are you? Izuku asked, lifting his head and staring at his reflection in the dark screen of his computer monitor. You said you're a partner. What does that mean? What do you want? A moment of silence, as if the creature was considering how to phrase it. I am what you would call a symbiote. My species is the Clintar. We require a host to survive. A compatible host. In return, we grant the host our strengths. We enhance them. We make them more of a monster, Izuku muttered, thinking of the talons and tendrils. More effective, the voice corrected smoothly. We survived a journey across the cold dark. We survived a fall that would have turned your frail body to paste. We defeated the slime creature. We saved the explosive one. Is that monstrous? Or is it successful? Izuku couldn't argue with the logic, as terrifying as it was. You wanted to eat that villain. And the pigeon. And you were looking at my mom. His voice cracked on the last word. We hunger, the symbiote stated, as if it were the simplest, most obvious fact in the universe. The transformation, the fight, it required a great deal of energy. Your body's chemistry provides a base sustenance, but it is not enough. We require specific biochemicals. Phenethylamine for one. Your brain produces it, but in small amounts. It is insufficient. Phenol what? Izuku blinked, his analytical mind briefly overriding his fear. A chemical, the voice explained patiently, like a teacher to a slow student. It is abundant in two things on this planet, as far as we can tell. The brains of most carbon-based life forms, and a strange, bitter, brown solid you call chocolate. Izuku's mind went blank for a second. Chocolate? And the slime creature's head would have been a fine appetizer, it added, as if an afterthought. We are a predator, boy. A hunter. It is our nature, that was it. The line in the sand. Izuku pushed himself to his feet, his fists clenched at his sides. His reflection stared back at him, his green eyes wide with a desperate, terrified resolve. He had lost the dream of being a hero like All Might. He would not lose his humanity, too. No, he said, his voice low and firm. No. That's the first rule. The most important rule. If we're going to do this, if we're bonded, then you listen to me. Rule number 1, we do not kill people, and we absolutely do not eat people. A wave of alien indignation washed over him. That is an unreasonable restriction. It is inefficient. They are made of meat. We are made to hunt. You would have us starve? I'll buy you all the chocolate you can eat. Izuku countered, his voice rising. I'll eat nothing but chocolate for the rest of my life if that's what it takes. But we are not murderers. We are not cannibals. The symbiote fell silent, considering. Izuku could feel its internal debate, the clash of its ancient predatory instincts against his own stubborn, unyielding morality. It was testing his will, sensing the iron conviction behind the fear. It found no weakness, no room for negotiation on this point. This will make things difficult, it finally grumbled. Your morality is a handicap. It's not a handicap, it's what makes me human. Izuku shot back. And it's non-negotiable. Another long pause. Then, a feeling that was not quite agreement, but a sort of grudging curiosity. So, we do not kill. We do not eat them. What, then, is our purpose? Why seek conflict if not for the spoils? Izuku took a deep breath. This was the second part. The part where he tried to salvage something, anything, from the wreckage of his life. Our purpose is to be a hero, a mental scoff, dry and full of contempt. A hero? Like the broken one on the roof? Like the useless ones who stood by and watched the explosive child suffocate? They are weak. Posturers. We are strong. Then we'll be a different kind of hero, Izuku insisted, his voice passionate. We'll be one that actually saves people. We have the power. We just proved it. We can do what they can't. We protect the innocent. We stop the villains. We save people, with a smile, if we can manage it. He faltered on the last part, the iconic All Might phrase tasting like ash in his mouth. The symbiote considered this new paradigm. The concept of protecting the weak for no personal gain was alien to it. And yet, there was an appeal. The challenge, the chance to prove its superiority not just through predation, but through sheer dominance in these strange, ritualized conflicts humans called heroics. Protect the innocent, by brutalizing the guilty, the voice mused, a dark, dangerous purr entering its tone. We can agree to these terms. For now. We will be your strength. Your shield. Your weapon. We will not kill. But we make no promises about broken bones. We will be a lethal protector. The name sent a shiver down Izuku's spine. It was terrifying. But it was also a compromise. A dark, bloody, terrifying compromise he could live with. Okay, he breathed. Lethal protector. And you, what do I call you? The others of my kind, the ones who fear us, who hate us, they call us a poison to the cause, a blight. We have taken the name for our own. We are Venom. Venom, Izuku repeated. The name fit perfectly. Okay, Venom. We have a deal. Excellent, Venom purred. Now, about this chocolate, and we also detect deep-fried, processed potato matter in the kitchen. Tater tots. The fat and starch content is acceptable. We require sustenance. Immediately. The sudden shift from cosmic predator to demanding gourmand was so jarring that Izuku let out a choked laugh. He stumbled out of his room, his mind reeling. He had just negotiated a moral code with an alien parasite that had named itself Venom, and now he had to go raid the kitchen for chocolate and tater tots before it decided to snack on the mailman. This was his life now. He devoured his katsudon, then proceeded to systematically empty the pantry of every chocolate bar, cookie, and bag of chocolate chips he could find, all while his mother watched with growing alarm. He shoveled it all into his mouth, the sweet taste a bizarre counterpoint to the savage satisfaction humming through his bond with Venom. More! Venom demanded. The potato cylinders! Izuku frantically microwaved a bag of frozen tater tots, eating them straight from the bowl, burning his tongue. It was barely enough to quiet the gnawing hunger to a low grumble. Izuku, honey, are you sure you're okay? Inko asked, placing a hand on his forehead. You don't have a fever. I'm fine, Mom. Just a growth spurt. He lied, his mouth full of potato. It was the worst lie he'd ever told. And it wouldn't be his last. The next day passed in a haze of paranoia and sensory management. School was a nightmare. He could hear every whispered joke, every pen click, every rustle of paper in the entire building. He spent the day with his hood up, trying to block out the noise, earning him more than one reprimand. Bakugo watched him with a strange, calculating look, the usual explosive rage replaced by a wary, unnerved silence. He hadn't said a word about the incident. No taunts, no threats. It was, in its own way, more terrifying than the explosions. When Izuku got home, dreading another negotiation over dinner, he was stopped by the sight of a visitor. A tall, impossibly skeletal man with sunken eyes and floppy blonde hair stood talking to his mother in the doorway. Toshinori Yagi. All Might. Izuku's blood ran cold. The Broken One, Venom hissed in his mind, a wave of immediate hostility and suspicion washing through him. He is here. Why is he here? He smells of weakness, but also, that power. That burning star. Be wary, Izuku. He is a threat. Young Midoriya, Toshinori said, his voice soft but carrying an undeniable weight. His eyes weren't pitying this time. They were sharp, analytical, and full of a deep, profound concern. I was hoping I could have a word with you. Inko looked between the two of them. Oh. Of course. Is this about the UA application? Something like that, ma'am, Toshinori said, not taking his eyes off Izuku. If we could speak in private? They ended up in Izuku's room. The silence was thick and heavy, punctuated only by the faint hum of his computer. All Might's skeletal form seemed to take up all the space, his presence immense even without his muscle form. He stared at the posters on the wall, a sad, complicated expression on his face. You really admire him, don't you? He asked quietly. Izuku could only nod, his throat tight. Yesterday, Toshinori began, turning his full attention to Izuku, his gaze piercing. At the sludge villain incident. I saw what you did. You ran in when no one else would. That was foolish. It was reckless, but it was also what a true hero does. Izuku's head snapped up, his eyes wide. But what I saw after that, Toshinori continued, his voice dropping, was not foolish. It was terrifying. I have seen thousands of quirks in my time, young man. I have never seen anything like what you displayed. A power that appeared from nowhere, that acted with such brutal efficiency. He leaned forward slightly. Your school records say you are quirkless. So tell me, Midoriya. What was that? Here it was. The question. Izuku's mind raced. He couldn't tell the truth. He'd be a lab specimen for the rest of his life. Lie. Venom's voice was a sharp, clear command in his head. Deception is a tool of survival. We will guide you. Tell him it was stress. A late bloomer. A dormant quirk, violently awakened. Your kind is unpredictable. Their biology is fraught with strange occurrences. He will want to believe a simple explanation. Use that. Taking a shaky breath, Izuku recited the lie Venom fed him. I don't know, he began, looking at his hands. I've always been quirkless. But when I saw Kaken, when I saw him dying, something just snapped. It was like a dam breaking inside me. It hurt. And then, that happened. He looked up at Toshinori, channeling all of his genuine fear and confusion into his expression. I can't explain it. They call it a stress-induced manifestation, right? A hysterical quirk activation? It's rare, but it happens. Toshinori studied him, his gaze unwavering. Izuku felt like a bug under a microscope. He could feel Venom coiling defensively within him, ready to act if the Broken One made a hostile move. Finally, All Might sighed, the sound heavy with the weight of the world. He seemed to accept the lie, or at least, accept that he would get no other answer. A power like that, so volatile, so dark, awakening in a boy with such a heroic spirit. It is a dangerous combination, young Midoriya. Power without guidance leads to destruction. For yourself and for others. He fell silent for a long moment, his gaze distant. He looked at the smiling posters, at the determined, terrified boy in front of him, and he made a decision. It was a gamble. The greatest gamble of his life. I told you on that rooftop that you couldn't be a hero, Toshinori said, his voice regaining a spark of its old fire. I was wrong. Or rather, I failed to see the whole picture. You have the heart of a hero, and now, it seems, you have the power of one too? A dangerous, untamed power. He stood up, and for a moment, Izuku thought he saw the ghost of All Might's true form flicker around him. I have come here to make you an offer. Your quirk, it is powerful, but it feels born of darkness and instinct. It needs a counterbalance. A light to guide it. A legacy of justice to anchor it. He looked Izuku dead in the eye. My quirk is not my own. It is a sacred torch, passed down from one generation to the next, growing in power with each user. It is the crystallization of hope. It is the power to save everyone. It is called One for All. Izuku's world, which had already been shattered once and rebuilt into something monstrous, tilted on its axis yet again. All Might's quirk was transferable? I believe, All Might said, his voice ringing with conviction, that your heroic soul, combined with the noble legacy of my power, can tame the darkness within you. It can ensure that your lethal protector instinct is always guided by the drive to be a true protector. I want to give you my power, young Midoriya. I want to train you. I want to help you become the greatest hero. He held out his hand, no longer a skeletal man, but a symbol of hope offering salvation. You can be a hero. And I have come to help you. The words. They were the exact words he had yearned to hear his entire life. But now they were tangled up in an impossible, terrifying new reality. A trick, Venom snarled. Why would any creature give away its power? It is a sign of weakness. Or a trap. Do not accept. But Izuku wasn't listening. He was crying. Silent, hot tears streamed down his face. It was too much. The despair, the alien, the violence, and now this impossible, ridiculous, beautiful offer. Yes, Izuku choked out, the word barely a whisper. Yes, please. They met the next morning at the break of dawn. The location was grimly appropriate, Dagoba Municipal Beach. The place where Izuku's dream had died, where Venom had been born, and now, where his new future would be forged. All Might stood before him, looking more determined than ever. Are you ready, young Midoriya? This will not be easy. The transferring of One for All requires the recipient to ingest the current user's DNA. He plucked a single hair from his head. So, eat this. Izuku stared at the blonde strand of hair. We are eating his hair? Venom asked, a tone of utter, alien disgust in its voice. We draw the line at eating people, but their dead keratin leavings are acceptable? Your human rituals are repulsive. Despite the absurdity, Izuku took the hair. His hand trembled. This was it. The power of the number one hero. He closed his eyes and swallowed it. It went down with a tickle. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, the world exploded. It started as a spark behind his eyes, a flicker of warmth. Then that spark became a bonfire, and the bonfire became a supernova. An ocean of pure, righteous, incandescent energy slammed into his system. It was the antithesis of Venom's cold, dark, predatory power. This was light. This was hope. This was the raw, untamed power of 9 generations of heroes, a torrent of strength and sacrifice and sheer willpower. And it was trying to tear him apart from the inside out. Aghay. A scream of pure agony was ripped from his lungs. His bones felt like they were vibrating into dust. His muscles seized, threatening to tear themselves from their anchor points. The energy of One for All, seeking a vessel to fill, found one already occupied. And it declared war. It burns! Venom shrieked in his mind, a sound of pure, primal panic. Trickery! It is unmaking us. Fight it! Expel it! The symbiote, which had been a quiet, humming presence, erupted in a desperate bid for survival. Black, viscous biomass flooded Izuku's system, a desperate attempt to contain the stellar fusion reaction happening in his cells. It was no longer a calm partnership. It was a chaotic battle for control of his body. All Might watched in horror, his eyes wide. Young Midoriya! Hold on. Your body must accept it. He had expected some discomfort, a fever perhaps. He had not expected this. Under Izuku's skin, a war was being waged. Veins of brilliant, crackling green-white light, one for all, were met with writhing tendrils of living shadow. The energy of OFA was pure and explosive, seeking to blow out the circuits. Venom's biomass was adaptive and resilient, acting as a living biological buffer. It wrapped itself around his bones, reinforcing them against the shattering pressure. It absorbed the violent overflow of energy, the raw power that would have blown his limbs off, and consumed it like a starving man at a feast. The pain was unimaginable. Izuku felt like he was being simultaneously incinerated and frozen, stretched and compressed. He collapsed to the sand, his body convulsing violently, black tendrils and flashes of green lightning flickering across his skin. But he was not breaking. Venom was holding him together, its own survival inextricably linked to his. It was absorbing the backlash, metabolizing the destructive force, and in doing so, it was creating a new equilibrium. After an eternity that was probably only 30 seconds, the storm began to subside. The convulsing lessened. The light and shadow retreated beneath his skin. Izuku lay gasping on the sand, every inch of him screaming in protest, but he was whole. No broken bones. No shredded muscles. Just a profound, bone-deep exhaustion and a terrifying new awareness. He could feel them both now. Two immense and opposing forces settled into an uneasy truce within him. One for all was a sun, a blazing core of limitless potential. Venom was a hungry nebula, a swirling vortex of adaptive, predatory darkness that orbited that sun. Slowly, shakily, Izuku pushed himself to his hands and knees. He looked at his hand, and flexed his fingers. He felt powerful. More powerful than he had with just Venom. The raw strength of OFA was there, accessible, but it was filtered through the symbiote. Young Midoriya, are you alright? All Might asked, cautiously approaching him. Izuku looked up, and a spark of green lightning flickered in his eyes. He pushed himself to his feet. He felt different. He could access the power. He focused, channeling a fraction of that new, burning energy into his legs. He didn't feel the threat of his bones shattering. He just felt Venom's biomass tightening around the muscles, reinforcing them. He could use it. He could probably use 8%, maybe even 10% of One for All's power right from the start, without turning into a hospital case. But there was a cost. A terrible cost. The internal battle, the act of absorbing and containing the transfer, had left the symbiote utterly drained. The gnawing hunger from the day before was a pale imitation of the ravenous, black hole-level starvation he felt now. Foolish boy! Venom roared in his head, its voice ragged and furious. That power, it is poison! It tried to burn us away. And now, we are empty. We are starving. You did this. You will fix it. We need to feed. Now, Izuku stumbled, clutching his head as the sheer ferocity of Venom's hunger threatened to overwhelm his consciousness. The world started to look like a buffet again, and All Might, the source of this agony, looked like the main course. He had the power of the greatest hero on earth. And the price was feeding the insatiable monster that lived inside his skin. This was his path. The path of a lethal protector, and it was going to be a hungry one. The 10 months that followed the transfer of One for All were a crucible. Izuku's life became a grueling, secret triathlon of body, mind, and soul. Every single day was a battle fought on 3 fronts. The first front was physical. Under All Might's surprisingly demanding tutelage, he waged war on the mountain range of scrap-polluting Dagoba Municipal Beach. But his methods were far from conventional. He wasn't just hauling refrigerators. He was using One for All at a volatile 5%, the explosive power just barely contained by Venom's biomass wrapping his limbs in a shimmering black sheath. He would leap across junk piles with impossible grace, the green lightning of his new power crackling around him. He would use thick, dark tendrils to ensnare and bundle tons of scrap metal, dragging them across the sand with a strength that made even All Might's skeletal form whistle in awe. He cleaned the entire beach in 7 months, not 10, leaving his mentor both immensely proud and deeply unsettled. The second front was mental. He had to learn to live with Venom. The symbiote was a constant presence, a sardonic, bloodthirsty roommate living in his skull. It critiqued his every move, mocked his morality, and offered brutally efficient, often horrific, solutions to every problem. Izuku learned to partition his mind, to build mental walls, to debate and negotiate, and, when necessary, to dominate the alien will with his own. He was no longer just a boy. He was a warden, a diplomat, and a zookeeper for a predator from the void. The third front was metabolic. The hunger. The unholy, all-consuming hunger. The fusion of OFA and the symbiote was a biological furnace that demanded constant fuel. His diet became a legend in the Midoriya household. He consumed entire family-sized bags of chocolate after every training session. His mother started buying tater tots in industrial-sized sacks from a restaurant supplier. He'd wake in the middle of the night, not from nightmares, but from Venom's guttural, mental roar of Feed US, and proceed to make a peanut butter, chocolate syrup, and leftover fried potato sandwich. He gained muscle, a lean and powerful physique forged by All Might's plan, but he was perpetually one missed meal away from his inner monster suggesting they go hunting for pigeons. These 10 months changed him. The timid, stammering boy who tripped over his own feet was gone, sanded away by hardship and pressure. In his place stood a young man who radiated a quiet, dangerous calm. It wasn't arrogance. It was the profound, unshakable confidence of someone who had wrestled with his own personal demons every single day and won. He had looked into the abyss, and the abyss had asked for more chocolate. An entrance exam, no matter how prestigious, felt manageable by comparison. On the morning of the UA entrance exam, Izuku walked through the massive gates of the academy with a steady, even stride. He didn't trip. His head was held high, his green eyes sweeping over the crowd of hopefuls, but his perception was far beyond simple sight. It was Venom that was truly seeing. Look at them, Izuku, the voice in his head purred, a low rumble of amusement. So much pride in such trivial abilities. The girl with the pink skin, she secretes acid. A useful solvent, but a poor defense. The one with the bird head, interesting. He contains a shadow entity. A lesser symbiote, perhaps? Pathetic. Izuku subtly pushed the commentary to the back of his mind, focusing on the path ahead. He felt a presence approaching, fast and angry, and he sidestepped a fraction of a second before Bakugo could slam a shoulder into him. Deku. The name was a venomous hiss, but it lacked its usual explosive force. Bakugo's red eyes weren't just angry, they were confused, wary. He was still haunted by the memory of the sludge villain incident, of the terrifying, non-human power that had saved him. So the quirkless loser finally manifested something, huh? Don't think for a second that freak show you pulled puts you on my level. The old Izuku would have flinched, stammered, apologized for existing. The new Izuku simply met his gaze, his expression unreadable. Hello, Kaken. Good luck on the exam. Let us bite him, Venom suggested eagerly. Just a little. A warning nip. He smells of nitroglycerin and fear. An unpleasant combination. We should remove him. No, Izuku thought, his will a firm, placid wall. He's not a threat. He's just loud. Bakugo was taken aback by the calm dismissal. He grunted, a sound of frustration and confusion, and stalked off, shoving other students out of his way. As he continued walking, Izuku's enhanced senses picked up on a spike of anxiety nearby. He glanced over to see a girl with a round, cheerful face and brown hair, who was wringing her hands and taking deep, nervous breaths. It was the girl from the sludge incident, the one with the gravity quirk. She looked like she was about to be sick. He gave her a small, almost imperceptible nod. A silent message, you can do this. Her eyes widened slightly, surprised by the gesture from a stranger, but a flicker of her nervousness seemed to subside. He didn't need to save her from a fall. A moment of solidarity was its own kind of heroism. The written portion of the exam was a formality. Questions that would have challenged him before were now simple. Venom's alien consciousness, capable of processing information at incredible speeds, sorted through facts and formulas with contemptuous ease. He finished in half the allotted time, leaving the proctor staring at him with suspicion. Then came the briefing. He found a seat in the massive auditorium, the air thick with anticipation. President Mike exploded onto the stage, his voice a physical assault on Izuku's heightened hearing. Painfully loud, Venom roared, and Izuku felt a brief, violent urge to send a tendril across the auditorium to rip the microphone from the hero's hand. He suppressed it with a practiced mental shove, gritting his teeth. President Mike explained the rules, a 10-minute mock battle in a massive cityscape. The targets were robots, designated as 1, 2, or 3 pointers based on their difficulty. The goal was to rack up as many points as possible. And finally, President Mike bellowed, "There's the 0-pointer. This guy is more of an obstacle. He's worth 0 points, so I'd recommend you listeners just avoid him." As the hero spoke, a tall, well-built student with glasses stood up abruptly. "Excuse me, sir," he boomed, his hand chopping the air with rigid precision. "On the handout, there are clearly 4 types of villains listed. If this is a misprint, it is a gross error for Japan's top hero academy." He then whirled around, pointing a stiff finger directly at Izuku. "And you, with the messy green hair. You have been muttering and fidgeting this entire time. If you are not taking this seriously, then you should leave." Izuku blinked. He hadn't been muttering his usual hero analysis. He had been quietly whispering, "No, we can't eat the loud hero. No, breaking his speakers isn't helping." "Yes, I'm sure." He was calming his partner. He met the student's glare without flinching. "My apologies," Izuku said, his voice calm and even. "I was concentrating. I'll be sure to remain still." The boy, who Izuku would later know as Tenya Ida, seemed thrown off by the lack of a flustered response. He sat down, still looking perplexed. Izuku simply turned his attention back to the stage, his mind already running calculations. Robots. Metal shells, simple circuits, predictable attack patterns. Not food, Venom grumbled in disappointment. But they will be fun to break. Brittle, pathetic little toys. We will show them what true strength looks like. A grim smile touched Izuku's lips. That was one thing he and Venom could wholeheartedly agree on. The bus ride to Battle Center B was tense. Izuku sat alone, his eyes closed, focusing. He wasn't meditating. He was having a pre-game huddle with his other half. "Okay, Venom. The plan is simple. We use OFA for speed and mobility. 8%, no more. You handle reinforcement and close-quarters combat. The goal is points. Efficiency is key. No grandstanding." "Grandstanding is how you assert dominance," Venom countered. "But we agree on efficiency. We will dismantle them. Systematically. It will be tidy." When they arrived, the sheer scale of the battle center was breathtaking. A sprawling, detailed cityscape rose before them, empty and waiting. The other applicants were stretching, activating their quirks, psyching themselves up. Izuku simply stood at the front of the massive gate, his body relaxed, his senses expanding to fill the space. He could hear the hum of the robots' standby systems, feel the vibrations of their internal mechanisms through the concrete. He was mapping the battlefield before the battle even began. President Mick's voice boomed from unseen speakers. "Ayan. Start." Silence. The other students looked around in confusion. "What's the matter?" the hero's voice yelled. "There's no countdown in a real fight. Run! Run! Run!" That was all the signal he needed. While the others were still processing, Izuku exploded into motion. "One for all, full cowling, 8%. He whispered. Green lightning crackled around him, and Venom's biomass, a nearly invisible black sheen, coated his entire body like a second skin. He was a blur, the first one through the gates, leaving a gust of wind and a crowd of shocked applicants in his wake. He rounded the first corner, and came face to face with a 1-point robot. It was already swiveling its single red eye towards him, its machine gun arm powering up. It was too slow. Izuku didn't punch it. A whip-thin black tendril, almost too fast for the eye to see, shot from his forearm. It didn't aim for the chassis, it pierced the robot's optical sensor with surgical precision. FZZT, the robot froze, blind. A second, thicker tendril erupted from his back, wrapped around the machine gun arm, and tore it from its socket with a screech of tortured metal. A final OFA-powered kick caved in its torso, and Izuku was already moving on before the smoking heap hit the ground. 1 point. Time elapsed, 2 seconds. He flowed through the streets like a natural disaster. His movements were a terrifying fusion of All Might's power and Venom's predatory grace. He vaulted over cars, ran up the sides of buildings, and descended upon his targets from above. A cluster of two-pointers ambushed him from an alley. He didn't break stride. His arms, now coated in thick, glistening black biomass, became living wrecking balls. He didn't just smash. He sheared through their metal hulls, the talons at the end of his fingers leaving deep gouges in their armor. He used their own momentum against them, spinning through their midst in a whirlwind of brutal, efficient destruction. The sound wasn't the clean boom of an explosion. It was a cacophony of groaning, tearing, and crunching metal. 6 points. Time elapsed, 10 seconds. He was a hunter. Venom's senses gave him a 360-degree awareness. He would react to an attack from behind before the enemy even rounded the corner, lashing out with a tendril to disable it without looking. He mapped the whirring of servos, the clanking of treads, the entire mechanical ecosystem of the city. He wasn't just fighting, he was culling. From other parts of the city, the other applicants were struggling to find targets. Where are all the villains? A student with laser navels complained, finding only smoking wreckage. Ida, using his engine quirk to dash through the streets, could only catch glimpses of a black and green blur causing havoc in the distance. He was fast, but Midoriya was on another level of mobility, treating the city like his personal jungle gym. The sheer power was astounding, and there was no visible drawback. Ida couldn't comprehend it. Uraraka, floating a robot and then releasing it to smash into another, was doing well. But the sounds from a few blocks over were chilling. They weren't the sounds of a heroic battle. They were the sounds of something being systematically and joyfully dismantled. It was awe-inspiring, but also deeply unsettling. Bakugo was a maelstrom of explosions and fury, blasting robots with practiced ease. But every time he cleared a street, he could see the rising smoke from another area, hear the distinct, terrifying sounds of rending metal that signaled Deku was at work. He was racking up points, but he knew on a gut level, that he was being outclassed. The useless, quirkless Deku he had tormented his whole life was not just ahead of him. He was operating on a plane of existence Bakugo couldn't even reach. And it was driving him insane. Izuku had lost count. 45? 50 points? Venom kept a running tally, but Izuku was lost in the flow. The fusion of their abilities was perfect. OFA provided the raw power, the engine. Venom provided the fine-tuned control, the adaptive weaponry, the perfect defense. He was a perfect fighting machine, and then the ground began to shake. A shadow fell over the entire city block. Buildings trembled, their windows rattling. From behind a skyscraper, a mechanical titan rose. The zero-pointer. It was immense, a moving skyscraper of dark green metal, its head scraping the clouds. Its single red eye scanned the area, and its massive arms, capable of leveling buildings with a single swipe, began to move. A wave of panic swept through the applicants. The zero-pointer. Run! It's not worth any points. Get out of here! Everyone turned and fled. It was the logical choice. The smart choice. Then Izuku heard it. A small, pained cry. His head snapped towards the source. It was the brown-haired girl, Uraraka. Her leg was pinned under a huge slab of fallen concrete, a casualty of the robot's emergence. She was looking up at the descending fist of the mechanical giant, her face pale with terror. Time seemed to slow down. Izuku saw her trapped form, the unstoppable machine, the fleeing students. 3 voices screamed in his head at once. His own, the core of his being. I have to save her. It's what a hero does. All Might's voice, a memory of 10 months of grueling training. Control, young Midoriya. Focus your power. A single, devastating blow is all you need. One for all, 100%. Leap and punch, and Venom's, a cold, logical, predatory hiss, a single punch is inefficient. Stupidity. The target is too large, the armor too thick. You will break yourself against it, even with our reinforcement. Brute force is a tool for the witless. We must dismantle it. We must unmake it. Give us control, Izuku. Let us end this farce. Let us show you what real power looks like. He looked at the girl's terrified face, at the impossibly large robot. All Might's way was a gamble. It could shatter his body, even with Venom. Venom's way was terrifying, monstrous. He couldn't fully give in, but a simple punch, it wasn't enough. He made a choice. Not All Might's plan. Not pure Venom. A fusion. A compromise born of desperation and power. Okay, Venom, he whispered, his eyes locking onto the zero-pointer. Let's get creative. He didn't crouch to leap. He planted his feet, and the ground around him cracked as he channeled not just 8%, but a surge of nearly 30% of One for All into his body. The green lightning exploded around him, no longer just a crackle but a roaring aura, and from within that aura, the darkness erupted. It wasn't just a sheen anymore. Thick, muscular, writhing tendrils of black biomass exploded from his back, his arms, his legs. They were a cage of living shadow, each one glowing with the internal, sickly green fire of OFA. His own form was lost within the maelstrom of black and green. His face, visible for a brief moment, was partially contorted into Venom's iconic visage, a jagged white eye marking, a jawline split by razor-sharp teeth. He launched himself forward, not up. He was a missile of pure, monstrous power. The tendrils, dozens of them, whipped out ahead of him. They didn't strike the robot. They ensnared it. They wrapped around its legs, its torso, its arms, its neck. They were like a colossal iron net, each strand surging with the power of One for All. The sound was like 1,000 anchor chains being dropped at once. Izuku landed on the roof of a building across the street, his feet digging into the concrete, anchoring himself. The tendrils went taut. The zero-pointer, its punch halfway to crushing Uraraka, was stopped dead. Then Izuku roared. It was not a human sound. It was a deep, guttural, multi-layered roar that was part boy, part beast, part cosmic horror. It was the cry of the lethal protector, and it echoed through the entire battle center. And he pulled. The tendrils constricted. The sound that followed was the stuff of nightmares. It was a symphony of metal pushed past its breaking point. A deafening shriek of groaning, popping, shearing steel. The zero-pointer's mighty limbs were bent at impossible angles. Its torso crumpled inward. The massive head, caught in a cage of a dozen OFA supercharged tendrils, wasn't punched or crushed by an external force. It imploded, collapsing in on itself as if squeezed by the hand of a god. With a final, deafening groan, the titan folded. It collapsed into a mountain of mangled, smoking scrap, its red eye flickering once before dying completely. Silence descended, broken only by the distant Time's Up from present mixed speakers, which sounded small and insignificant in the face of the carnage. Izuku stood on the rooftop, the tendrils retracting back into his body, the green lightning fading. The monstrous mask dissolved, revealing his own face, pale and slick with sweat. The massive expenditure of power, the fusion of two opposing forces at such a high level, hit him all at once. His stomach revolted. He collapsed to his knees, vomiting onto the rooftop, his body trembling violently from the strain. Glorious! Venom shrieked in triumph, but its voice was weak, strained. But costly. So costly. Feed us, Izuku. Chocolate. Potatoes. A whole cow. We are empty. Down below, the other applicants stared, frozen. They looked from the terrified but unharmed Uraraka, to the mountain of twisted metal that was once a robot, to the small, shaking figure on the rooftop. They weren't looking at a fellow applicant. They were looking at a monster. In the darkened monitor room, the mood was funereal. The pro-heroes stared at the screen displaying Izuku's handiwork, their faces ranging from pale to green. President Mike had his face in his hands, speechless for the first time in his life. His point total is 77 villain points, one of the staff murmured, her voice trembling. And well, She gestured to the screen where Uraraka was now talking to Izuku, who had come down to make sure she was okay. The other applicants were giving him a very wide berth. He's clearly earned rescue points as well. All Might stood in the back, in his skeletal form, a cold sweat beading on his forehead. Pride warred with a deep, chilling dread. I told him he could be a hero, he thought, his hands clenched into fists. I did not tell him to become a kaiju. Shota Aizawa, his face grim, finally spoke, his voice a low rasp. He has zero restraint. The raw power is off the charts, unlike anything I've ever seen. But it's wild, untamed, and frankly, terrifying. He looked at the other teachers, his gaze hard. He'll either become the greatest hero of his generation or its most catastrophic villain. There is no middle ground for a power like that. His final assessment was delivered with chilling finality. He is a high-potential, high-risk problem child. From his chair at the center of the room, Principal Nizu watched the screen, his beady black eyes gleaming. He wasn't scared. He wasn't worried. He was utterly, completely fascinated. He took a slow sip of his tea, a wide, unsettling, toothy grin spreading across his furry face. Aizawa saw risk. Nizu saw the ultimate educational challenge, a boy with the heart of a saint and the power of a demon. A puzzle of psychology, morality, and raw, untamed potential. Oh yes, the principal chirped, his voice full of glee. He'll do quite nicely. The acceptance letter from Yui was not the joyous, tear-filled moment Izuku had always dreamed it would be. It arrived in a plain, unassuming envelope, and when he opened it, a small metal disc clattered onto his desk. It projected a hologram, not of All Might in a triumphant pose, but of the skeletal Tashinori Yagi, looking tired and profoundly serious. Young Midoriya, he began, his voice gravelly. Congratulations. You passed, of course. A highlight reel of the exam flickered beside him, showing Izuku's terrifyingly efficient rampage. You achieved a score of 77 villain points, the highest in over a decade. In addition, you were awarded 60 rescue points for your actions in saving another examinee, for a total of 137 points. You did not just pass, you shattered the record. There was no praise in his tone. Only a deep, weary concern. However, the manner in which you passed has raised significant questions among the faculty. Your display against the zero-pointer was excessive. Power is a tool, my boy, not a sledgehammer for every problem. We have much to discuss about control, restraint, and the public image of a hero. He sighed, a sound heavy with the weight of his legacy. You have the heart. You now have the power. But the path ahead of you is more perilous than you can imagine. Welcome to your hero academia, young Midoriya. Your real training begins now. The hologram fizzled out, leaving Izuku sitting in the silent, All Might-themed bedroom that now felt like a relic from another lifetime. 60 rescue points? Venom's voice was a low, contemptuous grumble. They reward you for sentimentality. We neutralized the threat. That should have been enough. Their scoring system is illogical. Izuku didn't answer. He picked up the letter. Class 1A. He had made it. He was officially a student at the best heroes school in the country. He should have been ecstatic. Instead, a cold knot of anxiety tightened in his gut. He wasn't just going to school to learn how to be a hero. He was going as a warden, a diplomat, and a secret keeper. The other students would be learning to control their quirks. He had to learn how to control a quirk, an alien symbiote, and the volatile fusion reaction between the two, all while pretending he was just a normal kid who hit the quirk lottery late in life. The problem child was going to school. On the first day, Izuku stood before the colossal door of Class 1A, taking a deep, steadying breath. The sensory overload of the crowded hallway was already a low thrumming headache behind his eyes, a constant barrage of sights, sounds, and smells that Venom catalogued with detached, predatory interest. Okay, Venom, Izuku projected mentally, a practice routine by now. We are here to learn. Not to intimidate. Not to analyze everyone's weaknesses for future combat. Keep the commentary to a minimum. And please, for the love of everything, don't refer to our classmates as appetizers. Their potential as sustenance is a key metric for threat assessment, Venom retorted coolly. The one with the engines in his legs, for example. All lean muscle. Probably tough and stringy. We would pass. Izuku mentally sighed and pushed the door open. The classroom was already buzzing with the nervous energy of first-day introductions. He immediately spotted two familiar faces. The tall, rigid boy with glasses who had admonished him during the briefing was locked in a stiff, formal conversation with a few other students. And sitting at a desk near the back, looking as explosive as ever, was Katsuki Bakugo. Bakugo's head snapped up the moment Izuku entered. His red eyes widened, not with the usual contempt, but with a flicker of something else, shock, anger, and the deep, unsettling memory of the entrance exam. He looked away quickly, grinding his teeth, a low growl rumbling in his chest. He hadn't confronted Izuku since the exam. He didn't know how. How do you bully a force of nature? Before Izuku could find a seat, he was approached by the bespectacled boy. He moved with the rigid precision of a robot, his hand chopping the air. "Good morning," he boomed, startling a few nearby students. "I am Tenya Ida, from Semi-Private Academy. I have come to offer my sincerest apologies." Izuku blinked. "Apologies? For what?" "For my behavior at the briefing," Ida declared, bowing at a perfect 90-degree angle. "I misjudged you completely. Your performance in the practical exam was nothing short of masterful. You understood the true nature of the test while I did not. You are clearly the superior student, and I was wrong to challenge you." "We accept his fealty," Venom purred with smug satisfaction. "He knows his place. He will make a fine lieutenant." "He's apologizing, not swearing allegiance," Izuku corrected, trying not to let his exhaustion show. "It's okay, Ida. You were just being diligent. I'm Midoriya Izuku. It's nice to meet you." Before Ida could launch into another formal declaration, a cheerful voice cut in. "Oh, it's you! The plain-looking boy who destroyed that giant robot." Izuku turned to see the girl he had saved, Achiko Uraraka. Her round face was lit up with a genuine, bubbly smile. "That was amazing! The way you took down that zero-pointer, it was like BWHOSH, and then KRKOM. And you came to check on me after. I wanted to thank you, but you were kind of intensely vomiting." Izuku's face flushed. "Ah, yeah? Exertion," he mumbled, a half-truth. "It's nice to see you made it in. I'm Midoriya. I'm Uraraka Achiko. It's super nice to meet you properly." This was normal. A normal, friendly conversation. For a moment, Izuku felt a wave of relief so potent it was almost dizzying. Maybe he could do this. Maybe he could be just another student. The illusion was shattered when a new voice, low and tired, echoed from the doorway. "If you're here to make friends, then you can pack up and leave." Everyone turned. Lying on the floor in a yellow sleeping bag, looking like a giant, exhausted caterpillar, was their teacher. He took a long slurp from a juice pouch before unzipping himself and standing up. His eyes were bloodshot, his black hair was a mess, and his face was covered in stubble. He looked more like a homeless man than a pro-hero. "I'm your homeroom teacher, Shota Aizawa," he said, his voice a monotone drone. "It took you all 8 seconds to quiet down. That's not going to work. Life is short. You're all wasting potential." He rummaged in his sleeping bag and pulled out a set of blue UA gym uniforms. "Put these on. Now. Meet me on the field." The locker room was a fresh hell of sensory input. The cacophony of excited chatter, slamming lockers, and the mingled sense of deodorant and teenage anxiety was a low-grade torture. Izuku changed quickly, trying to block it all out, focusing on the cool, smooth feel of the gym uniform against his skin. He could feel Venom, restless and agitated by the noise, a low thrum of irritation under his skin. On the training field, Aizawa regarded them all with a look of profound boredom. "Today, we're going to be holding a quirk assessment test," he announced, causing a wave of murmurs to ripple through the class. "A quirk assessment on the first day?" Uraraka asked. "But what about orientation? And the welcome ceremony?" "Yui isn't a normal school," Aizawa countered, his gaze sweeping over them. "We don't have time for pointless pleasantries. You're here to become heroes, and that starts now. We'll be conducting 8 physical tests that you all took in middle school, but this time, you'll be allowed to use your quirks. It's the most rational way to gauge your baseline potential. He turned his gaze on one student in particular. Bakugo. Kaken flinched, surprised at being singled out. You got the highest score on the practical exam for villain points. What was your farthest softball throw in middle school? 67 meters, Bakugo grumbled. Right, Aizawa said, tossing him a softball. Try it now with your quirk. Bakugo strode into the chalk circle, a feral grin spreading across his face. This was his element. A chance to show off, to reassert his dominance. He wound up, and with a thunderous explosion that rocked the field, launched the ball into the sky. Die! He screamed, the word more a force of habit than a direct threat. Aizawa held up a small device. It beeped. 705.2 meters. The class erupted. Whoa! That's amazing! We can really use our quirks? This is gonna be so fun. The word fun seemed to trigger something in Aizawa. His eyes narrowed, and a dangerous aura seemed to descend over him. Fun? He repeated, his voice dropping to a low, menacing hiss. You think this is fun? You have 3 years here to become a hero. You think it's all going to be games and fun times? His lips curled into a humorless smile. All right. New rule. The student who ranks last in total points for these 8 tests will be judged as having 0 potential, and will be expelled immediately. Panic. Pure, unadulterated panic swept through the class. Expulsion on the first day? It was insane. It was. This is Yurei, Aizawa said, as if reading their minds. As heroes, you'll be facing life-or-death situations, unfair odds, and catastrophes every day. Fun doesn't factor into it. For the next 3 years, Yui will do everything it can to put you through the ringer. This is plus ultra. So show me if you can overcome it. The atmosphere shifted instantly from excited to deadly serious. Everyone was now looking at the tests not as a game, but as a fight for their very future at the school. The first few tests were straightforward for Izuku. The 50-meter dash. He clocked in at 3.04 seconds. A blur of green lightning that was second only to Ida's engine-powered sprint. Grip strength. He didn't need OFA. He let Venom subtly reinforce the muscles in his hand, shattering the testing device. The display read error, and Aizawa gave him a long, unreadable stare. Standing long jump. A simple 8% leap cleared the sandbox entirely. He was performing at an elite level, but he was holding back. He was consciously avoiding the monstrous transformations, the overt use of tendrils. He was trying to present his quirk as a simple power enhancer, something controllable and understandable. He just wanted to get through the day without causing an incident. The whispers followed him after every test. That's the guy from the exam, right? His power is insane. He doesn't even look tired. But it was Bakugo who watched him with the most intensity. Every impressive feat Izuku performed was another nail in the coffin of Bakugo's worldview. He was seeing the boy he'd written off as a worthless pebble effortlessly demonstrating a level of power that rivaled, and perhaps even surpassed, his own. The rage was building in him, a volcano waiting to erupt. The eruption came during the ball throw. It was Izuku's turn. He stepped into the circle, the soft ball feeling small and light in his hand. He could feel the eyes of the entire class on him. He could feel Aizawa's analytical gaze. He could feel Bakugo's burning glare. Okay, Venom. We need a good score, but nothing too crazy. Let's aim for just above Bakugo's. 20% should do it. Reinforce the arm, manage the blowback. Why hold back? Venom grumbled. The explosive one showed his power. We should show him ours. We should launch this sphere into orbit. Assert dominance. It's a test of control, not just power, Izuku insisted. And we are in control. He took a deep breath, focusing the emerald energy of one for all into his right arm. The familiar green lightning crackled around him, more intense than before. He could feel Venom's biomass flowing, weaving itself into his muscle fibers, forming a living, biological brace from his shoulder to his fingertips. He reared back, ready to throw, and then it happened. Hey! Aizawa's voice was a sharp crack of a whip. The green lightning around Izuku's arm vanished. The feeling of power receded. He stumbled, the sudden loss of energy throwing him off balance. He looked up. Aizawa was staring at him, his own hair floating around his head, his eyes glowing a terrifying, baleful red. His signature capture weapon, a scarf made of a carbon fiber and metal alloy, whipped around him like angry snakes. I erased your quirk, Aizawa stated, his voice flat but laced with steel. The floating hair and glowing eyes were the telltale signs of his quirk, erasure, in action. From your performance in the entrance exam, it's clear you can't control your power. A quirk like that, a reckless power that injures the user, you'd be a liability in a fight. You'd rush in to save one person, only to be taken out of commission, forcing another hero to save you. Whatever your intentions, you'd be nothing more than a useless burden after one big move. Izuku stared, his mind reeling. He erased my quirk, but he did not. Venom's voice was a low, dangerous growl, full of surprised curiosity. The burning light, the one for all, that power is gone. Suppressed. But we are still here. We are not a quirk. We are a biological entity. His trick does not work on us. This was a revelation. Aizawa's famed erasure, a power that could neutralize almost any opponent, had a loophole. A massive, alien, symbiote-shaped loophole. Izuku could still feel Venom, coiled and ready, a hidden weapon his teacher knew nothing about. Aizawa's eyes stopped glowing, and his hair fell back into place. I've returned your quirk. Try again. And this time, show me you can be useful without becoming a liability. The pressure was immense. The entire class was watching. His teacher had just called him a useless burden. Bakugo was smirking, a cruel, triumphant look on his face. Izuku stepped back into the circle. He took a breath, closing his eyes. He thinks it's all or nothing, Izuku thought, a sudden clarity cutting through his anxiety. He thinks I can only do that 100% monster smash. He's testing me. He wants to see if I have any control at all. Let us show him control, Venom hissed, a predatory glee entering its tone. Let us show him precision. Izuku reopened his eyes. He didn't power up his whole arm this time. He focused, channeling the 20% surge of One for All, not into the limb, but into a single point, the tip of his index finger. The green lightning crackled, concentrated into a single, brilliant starburst at the end of his finger. He threw the ball. At the exact moment of release, he flicked his finger, transferring the entirety of the stored kinetic energy into the ball in one explosive instant. The ball shot forward with a sonic boom, leaving a visible shockwave in the air. It was a tiny white comet disappearing into the blue sky. There was a moment of stunned silence. Izuku looked down at his hand. His index finger was throbbing, a deep purple bruise already forming. It hurt, but it wasn't broken. Venom was already at work, flooding the damaged tissue with regenerative cells, the throbbing pain lessening with each passing second. It was a controlled injury. A calculated sacrifice. Aizawa held up the device. A grin, the first genuine one they had seen all day, stretched across his tired face. 705.3 meters. He had beaten Bakugo. By 1/10 of a meter. With a single, controlled flick of his finger, the class stared in disbelief. Bakugo's jaw was on the floor, his face a mask of incandescent rage and utter incomprehension. He had used his entire body, a massive, signature explosion. Deku had used his finger. DKU, you bastard! Bakugo screamed, launching himself forward, his hands already sparking. Tell me how you did that or you're dead. Before he could take 2 steps, he was tangled in Aizawa's capture weapon. The scarf wrapped around him, immobilizing him completely. Stand down, Aizawa said, his eyes glowing red again. Stop making me use my quirk. I've got dry eye, damn it. The rest of the tests passed in a tense blur. Izuku performed well, using small, controlled bursts of OFA, always mindful of the strain. He was learning, adapting. He could feel Aizawa's gaze on him, no longer dismissive, but sharp, calculating, and intrigued. When the final results were posted, Izuku was in first place. At the bottom of the list, in 20th place, was a short, purple-haired boy named Minoru Mineta. He was sobbing uncontrollably. And by the way, Aizawa said, turning to leave, the expulsion thing was a lie. The class, except for a very astute girl with a black ponytail, stared in shock. It was a rational deception, Aizawa drawled over his shoulder. To make you all push your limits. As the class began to file back towards the locker rooms, a mixture of relief and exhaustion on their faces, Aizawa stopped beside Izuku. Midoriya, he said, his voice low. Izuku froze. Why yes, sir? Aizawa's gaze was intense. Your quirk, it's not just a simple enhancement, is it? The way you recovered from that finger injury was too fast. The way you shattered the grip machine, there's something else going on. Something you're not showing. Izuku's blood ran cold. He is perceptive, Venom noted calmly. A dangerous quality in a teacher. Be careful what you reveal. I'm still learning its limits, Izuku said, the practice lie tasting like ash. Aizawa stared at him for a long moment, then nodded slowly. See that you do. You have more potential than anyone else in this class. Don't waste it. And don't think for a second I'm done watching you. You're my problem child now. He turned and walked away, leaving Izuku standing alone on the field, the weight of his secret pressing down on him more heavily than ever. He had survived the first day. He had even come in first, but in doing so, he had painted a massive target on his back, earned the burning hatred of his childhood rival, and attracted the undivided attention of his terrifyingly perceptive teacher. The life of Class 1A's problem child was just getting started.